Welcome back to Spray River Homestead. On today's Top 5 Tuesday, we're going to tell you why you should not bring home an LGD for your homestead.
Okay, maybe that's a little aggressive. We're going to tell you 5 reasons you probably should not bring home an LGD for your homestead.
So if you bring home a new LGD, one of the things you're going to find out is if your fencing is actually going to keep your LGD where they're supposed to be.
So most people look at it and think a dog is a dog is a dog, and I've got a 4-foot fence and that's good enough. Remember that you're bringing home a dog that should probably go over 100 pounds, all the way up to 150 plus in some breeds. So you're kind of looking at stuff like, well, if it's really doing its job and it's trying to protect your property, or your animals, not your property, your animals, is a 4-foot fence going to hold it? Kaden?
Well, that kind of is going to depend on the dog. So I'll give you 2 examples of dogs we have here on the property. One is being the one that can jump and climb like a dog I have never seen before.
I think she's part monkey.
I think she's part monkey. So we brought her home and put her out in her yard where it was like, hey, we walked her around and said, this is all yours. Now remember, LGDs have the rule of thumb that if they can see it, they own it. So before we could walk literally from the barn to the house, she had jumped the fence, ran down to the house, and was sitting on the doorstep waiting for us to show up because she wanted to go inside the house.
So a 4-foot fence, clearly not enough. So to keep her in the barn while we tried to make changes to the fence, we added some wood. So we put it up, 6 feet?
Yep.
She was out. So remember that these guys can climb. Not all of them will. Out of these 6 that we have now owned, we have had 2 that were horrible about going over the fence. 1 that will go through the fence because she's a little bit smaller. So if you've got barbed wire, hot wire, or cattle panel type things, that not the mesh, but the actual like tubal panels, don't think you're keeping that dog in. It really doesn't work. You're going to have at minimum a netting fence, at minimum a 4-foot fence, and you might find out that you've got a dog like ours, and they get really hard to break once they get the idea that I can make it over. So for us, what are we doing? We're going with 6 and 7-foot fence for her yard and her pasture because there's no other way to keep her in.
We've also got one that digs. So while he doesn't want to go over necessarily, a lot of times he will go under. So he will dig all day long until he gets enough of a tunnel. That's out of buildings, that's out of fencing, that's out of another fencing. And we've also got one that figured out that if she waits long enough for the snow to melt off the barns, it creates a nice berm. And she actually this year went over 2 fences, literally up over one, next to the berm, up over the other, and she was out running the neighborhood.
Yeah, and about that digging, remember these guys have paws a lot of times like that. And when we actually catch him in the act of digging, because he's stealthy, that's what these guys are, when he's in the act of digging, it looks like somebody's throwing shovelfuls of dirt. And he can dig a tunnel to get his big 130-pound body out and gone in 15 minutes if the conditions are right. So another thing to think about, do you have the right fence before you bring one of these guys home?
So point 2 on maybe you should not bring home an LGD is if you actually have something for them to guard or you have the right thing for them to guard.
So we see this a lot where people say, well, I'm going to get goats eventually, so I'm going to get a Pyrenees now, or an Akbosh or an LGD breed, and I'll bring the livestock in later. Well, if you're bringing it home as a puppy and you're thinking that you're going to grow this dog till 2, because that's when they really develop a brain and start to listen, they have no experience at this point. So you're going to take a dog or a pup and grow it up in a non-livestock environment and then turn the livestock loose with it and think that it's going to work. And it does not work. There are exceptions to every rule. Sometimes people get lucky. Some people end up with dead sheep, dead goats, dead lamb, or dogs that just take off. The other thing is, like he said, the wrong thing to guard. Remember what the L in this stands for: livestock, not poultry. You'll get some dogs that establish territory and will put things or keep things away from your chickens, your ducks, your geese, whatever. But you're just as likely to have a dog that kills poultry. It's not what these guys were developed for. They were developed for the guardian duties of sheep and goats. So when you start asking them to guard something that they are not biologically programmed for, you're looking at the potential for a disaster.
Now imagine you're in this situation. You bring home a new puppy, a new LGD, or whatever it is, even
Grown,
if it's a senior
little,
dog,
yeah, whatever size.
whatever it is. You may have a dog that likes to bark. We have one we call Dr. Woo. And the reason is she runs all day long if she's awake, wooing. Woo, 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 woo.
Now, in all fairness, she is what she thinks is guarding her territory. From cats, from ground squirrels, from crows, from hawks. And I know some people are going to sit there and say, well, why didn't you train it out of her? That is
trained.
Yeah, that's training her to... She really honestly believes, you can tell by her demeanor, that she believes that these things are a threat. You can't always get these dogs to understand that that's not a threat, because if they believe that it's a threat, they're going to go with instinct, unfortunately.
Now, we also have another dog that, again, if he can see it, he owns it. Well, he can hear cars turning off the main road onto our gravel road 3/4 mile away. When he hears that, and you're thinking, 3/4 mile? Seriously, 3/4 mile, he starts barking. He doesn't know if it's us coming home. He doesn't know if it's a new neighbor, someone coming down looking for hunting down in here. He doesn't care.
My parents, some friends, it's all the same to him. It's his property. So he would bark when the last people lived next door. He would bark from the minute they turned off the road until they passed the house and made it the half mile back into their place and got out of the car. If he could hear them talking back there, he barked. And so they were constantly complaining about how noisy he was. And remember, we're half a mile from our neighbors. And these guys, as I've said in other videos, their first line of defense, right, is the bark. They bark to keep things away. They are very loud, very booming. My parents live 1.5 miles as the crow flies, and sometimes on a clear night, they can hear them all that way. So if you have a noise ordinance, maybe you've got a neighbor that isn't so dog crazy, these are things you need to know about beforehand, because you really don't want to bring an LGD home and then find out you have to get rid of it. And they do bark, and they are nocturnal, so they bark at night. And this causes a lot more problems if you've got neighbors. And I know some people are going to watch this and go, well, quite frankly, screw my neighbor. But even in places that don't have a noise ordinance, they do have nuisance noise laws. We even fall under that. Our neighbors did call and complain about us, and the police basically told her they had to be within, 300 yards, their house to our property line, and we're half a mile. So there was nothing they would do. But not every place is the same.
Right. And not every neighbor is going to be the same. Even in HOA, where they may allow dogs, they may not say you can't have one. Ooh, but I tell you what, they bark all night the first night. And I tell you, the first time we got an LGD, he barked, I swear, 5 days straight, rain or shine. If he was awake, he was barking. So it's something to get used to. While you may not care, everyone around you may. Now, LGDs, honestly, are pretty darn stubborn. Like Nikki said, they take until about 2 before they really kind of get a brain in their head. So while a lot of puppies will start getting trained 8-10 weeks of that, you can get them to sit and shake and all that kind of stuff. An LGD, they are not going to take commands from you until at least probably about 2.
And they're a funny dog. If you start with a pup, a lot of times the first 6 months, you can get them to do stuff like a normal dog. Because when I had heard that, I thought, okay, we bring home a pup, and that pup is learning everything. And I'm thinking, everybody that I've talked to is wrong. These people that I talked to that were experienced breeders and veterinarians and trainers, they don't know what they're talking about. And then they turn about 6 months, they get some size on them, and they decide, you know what, I'm in a teenage phase now. I'm not listening to you. And you will have a battle of wills for the next 6 months. Then they hit about a year old, they straighten out, they start going, okay, well, Dad's in charge, I'm gonna listen. And then one day, they wake up about 3 months later, and they're like, you know what, he ain't the boss of me. So LGDs are one of those things that, one, you probably should have some experience with big dogs and the handling of big dogs. Because really big dogs like this take a different mindset than training your Chihuahua or a dog under 70 pounds or 50 pounds or whatever. So it's a different mindset. If you don't have experience, I would highly suggest you talk to some trainers or, really experienced LGD trainers and owners and start there before you bring one home, because these are not pets. And most of the information you find online is how to train a pet dog. These guys have a brain that does not work that way.
Now, with all that information, the last point I want you guys to take away from this is that you should really consider, do you truly need one? Now, we talked about some of the territory in that, and some dogs will guard territory and they'll guard anything within that. So you put some chickens in there or anything else, maybe they'll guard that, right? Because they're guarding territory. They don't care about the birds. We've had some that will protect birds, but it's about 50-50 half the time. They give them a sideways look, and you got to stop them before they get that rooster. Now, the thing about this is why we say, should you really get one or do you really need one, is that a lot of times you'll get dogs that, well, they frankly don't really want to do what you want them to do. They're not going to guard what you put them with.
Remember what these guys were developed for. So for the most part, they're developed to ward off big cats and big canines. So while we think, okay, well, and this is one of the things we heard, and we actually did get one for this purpose, was we were losing chickens to raccoons. So we brought in an LGD because everybody said this is the thing to do. Now we got lucky that the first one hated hated raccoons, right? So he would chase them, and just the smell of him kept the coons away. But we have other dogs that don't care about anything under about 40 pounds.
Right.
Because like our big male is a 150-pound dog. If it's under 40 pounds, he doesn't care. He's not threatened by it. So unless it makes an aggressive move that he sees, he doesn't care. So fox will run down the fence. He doesn't care. Raccoons, he doesn't care. It's not something he's worried about. If something comes along that's big enough to go after his goats, he becomes all hair and teeth and nails and claws, and it's a whole different dog entirely. The little one, like we were saying, she runs around barking at everything because she's only about 55 pounds. She's a runt out of her litter, and she's not a very big dog, and so she sees threats everywhere. Anything bigger than a baby goat, she assumes it's coming to kill them, which can be a little irritating. But just remember, like, if you don't have a threat that's actually big enough for these dogs to take seriously, you may not really need them. You might be better off, especially when we were talking, if you're in a suburban type neighborhood or smaller lots and you don't have a lot of true predators around. Say you're only dealing with fox, raccoon, weasels. These guys don't take that very seriously. You might be better off looking for some kind of coon dog that you can train to leave the poultry alone. Border collies can be pretty good. A smaller breed dog that is more focused on smaller animals, right? So that would be my suggestion. Really think about what you're doing. Do you actually have a need for an LGD? I mean, these guys are tough. Are you finding bobcats, coyotes, large fox, mountain lions, bears, wolves, that kind of thing? I mean, I don't suggest an LGD go up against some of those bigger three, but they are very good at warding them off. Unless you've got a threat like that, you're probably not really in need of an LGD.
So hopefully that makes a little sense on going over those 5 points on whether you really need them, what you need them for, do you have fencing? I mean, there's a lot of reasons to have them. There's a huge amount of benefit to have them, but a lot of times people just assume that the LGD is a kind of a one-size-fit-all category, and really it's not. These guys are really a different dog than most everything else you're going to find online. They may or may not work for you, and a lot of times, I mean, we've seen them going for $1,000 a piece. $1,000 dog that lays out there and doesn't care that anything's getting eaten. Well, that's a bad day on. That's a bad day.
And we're going to talk more about, I'm getting ready to make more LGD videos because I'm getting a lot of pushback from people who have seen the other ones that are saying, well, all you talk about is the negatives. We talk about the negatives first because of the fact that there is, especially in places like Texas, and here in the Pacific Northwest, they're starting to see a bit of a crisis with the LGDs where people are adopting these dogs. They don't understand them. They don't do what they're supposed to do. The barking becomes a problem, and they're dropping these guys off at shelters or, God forbid, out in the country and abandoning these dogs. So the reason we talk about so much of the negative stuff first is we don't want you to get into a position where you bring home a dog that doesn't work for you and now you're scrambling to find a very large dog a home. So it's really important to know before you get one what you're in for and whether or not it's really the right thing for you.
So hopefully that makes sense. If you have additional questions to anything we haven't covered, or if you've seen all 3 videos we've done on LGDs and you have more questions there, or you want a little bit different perspective on it, put it down in the comments. We're very good at answering questions, even if it takes us a couple days that we're busy. And it's getting to that time where gardens are coming up. So leave us comments down in the questions, down in there, everything down there. We're all there for you, and we'll throw up some links here at the end to the other videos and some of the other pieces out there.
If you've got specific stuff, leaving it in the questions is really, or in the comments, is really good for me to know what I can make a video for. So if you've got something you really want me to talk about, leave it down in there, and I know to add it to the list.
So that's it for today. Got questions, comments, hit the like, subscribe. We'll see you next time for Sprague River Homestead.
Happy homesteading!